This is the new fully electric Lexus RZ, and in this video I'm going to be driving it with a steering wheel, driving it without a steering wheel, wearing an invisible blanket and finding out what the interior has in common with a horse. But before we get started, just remember, if you want a great deal on your next new car, just head over to whatcar.com. It's completely free and you could save yourself a lot of money. Now, you'd never guess from what I'm wearing and that bleak, freezing fog in the background over there, but we are actually on the French Riviera. Lexus was doubtless hoping for blue skies. It's actually 3 degrees, and believe it or not, it might actually snow in a minute. So before that happens, let's have a quick look around the outside. Now, Lexus has acknowledged that some customers and some potential customers haven't been overly keen on the huge grilles that featured on the previous generation NX and RX. So things have been toned down quite a bit here, and obviously this is an electric car, so it doesn't need a grille at all. It's still very obviously a Lexus. You've got this spindle-shaped nose here, but it's far more subtle, particularly if you go for a single paint color like this. If you go for the bi-tone version, it's a bit more in your face, and you'll either like that or you won't, but at least you do have the choice. While we're on the subject of colors, this is called Ether Blue Metallic. It's been inspired by blue skies, apparently, very appropriate for today. And there are also some Sonic colors, including Sonic Copper. They have highly compressed metal flakes with pigment to give a deeper, more lustrous finish. And if you come around to the side here, you will see some 18-inch alloys. Now, Lexus says that up to 80% of buyers in the UK will go for 20-inch wheels. They come as standard on the higher trim levels. And sure, they look a bit better, but the 20-inch wheels aren't good news for range. So if you go for 18-inch wheels, then the official WLTP range is 273 miles, and that drops to 245 miles if you go for the bigger wheels. Even that range isn't great, to be honest. So the BMW iX3 that's a rival to this and the Genesis GV70 electrified can do a few more miles on a charge, and the slightly smaller Tesla Model Y can go much, much further. And there's a simple reason for that. This has a 64 kilowatt hour usable capacity battery, and that's no bigger than the battery that you get in, say, a Kia Niro EV, a car that's much, much smaller than this. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in other ways, because this battery is what Lexus describes as long life. And that means it should have 90% of its original capacity after 10 years, although Lexus only guarantees 70% capacity. That's still better than most other manufacturers though, which guarantee 70% capacity for around 8 years. Better news when it comes to charging though, because unlike Lexus's first electric car, the UX300e, this has a CCS charging port. That is the European standard, and it means you can plug in at some of the latest charging locations across the country. The RZ can pull up to 150 kilowatts. That's not bad, and it means that you can get a 10 to 80% charge, theoretically in ideal conditions, in around half an hour. But some rivals can do quite a bit better. So the GV70 electrified, that can pull almost 240 kilowatts for a 10 to 80% charge in less than 20 minutes. If you're plugging in at home using a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, expect to wait around 10 hours for a 0 to 100% charge. Now, the RZ is quite a big car actually, probably bigger than it looks. It's 4.8 meters long, so it sits between the NX and the RX on size, and that means it's quite practical. So if you come around to the boot here, all versions get a powered tailgate as standard and have loads of luggage space inside. So there's no lip at the entrance here, very easy to load, and it's very broad towards the back of the car. It doesn't narrow too much as you get towards the rear seats either. And there's also loads of underfloor storage. So that's really, really impressive. And there's more good news when it comes to rear seat space. So getting into the back doesn't involve pulling a handle. You just press a little button there and the door opens. And when you get inside, you will find absolutely loads of space. I'm just over 6 foot. The seat in front is set up for my driving position, and look, loads of knee room there. Foot space isn't too bad either. Seat is as far down as it will go in the front, and still plenty of room to move around. You've got a virtually flat floor here, so fitting 3 people side by side should be fairly easy. And also the seat backs can be reclined, although there are only 2 stages. To be honest, there's not a huge amount of variation there, but otherwise very, very impressive. And if you're not wearing a bobble hat, then there's plenty of headroom as well. And when you want to get out, it's another button press. You just tap this one down here and the door opens, and it won't open if it senses there's a cyclist or a pedestrian or another car coming alongside of you. Now, Lexus says that the driving position in the RZ has been inspired by the way that a rider would intuitively control a horse using very small movements of the reins. So that's why everything has been positioned where it's easy to see using small movements of the eyes and touch using small movements of the hands. So you've got this cockpit style arrangement where everything V'd towards you, the start button, easy to see and reach, and the digital driver display, for my driving position at least, is very easy to see. I don't have to move the steering wheel into a position that it isn't ideally comfortable. The infotainment display as well, that is angled towards the driver, and it's basically the same screen that you get in the Lexus NX and the RX. It's much, much better than some of Lexus's infotainment systems over the years. Pretty easy to use. We would prefer a secondary rotary controller like the one you get in a BMW iX3 or a Genesis GV70. But if you're going to have a touchscreen, you should at least make it easy to use with nice big icons, and the RZ has that. Another really cool thing are these aircon controls. So in a lot of modern cars, we moan about having to use a touchscreen just to adjust the interior temperature. You do have to use the touchscreen to control some aspects of the air conditioning, but you can adjust the interior temperature using these really cool dials down here. When it comes to storage, there is quite a bit. You've got a couple of cup holders here, well positioned again. There is some extra storage under the front armrest here, another tray just below the touchscreen for your phone or keys or whatever, and some quite small door bins down here, but there's also another little space here for some coins or whatever. The only thing you don't get is a glove box. Interior quality, generally very impressive as well. So you've got lots of soft touch material up here on the dashboard, a nice finish on the steering wheel as well, not shiny at all, feels very classy, and a nice finish on the insides of the doors here as well. If you go for the range topping Takumi, then the seats are made of something called ultra suede, and that is a mix of biodegradable and recycled plastics. But if you go for cheaper versions, including this, then you get faux leather as standard. Another really cool thing I want to talk to you about is the heating. Now, heating an electric car's interior uses up a lot of power, and in the winter particularly, it means that it can have a big impact on efficiency and range. So Lexus has come up with a really clever solution. There are some infrared heaters down here that are supposed to make you feel like you've got a warm blanket over your legs. And combined with the heated seats, it says it will use 70 watts to keep the driver warm on a long journey. If you want to keep both the driver and the front passenger warm, then that will take up around 170 watts. And if you compare that to the 5,000 watts or 5 kilowatts that it takes if you fire up the climate control and warm the entire interior, then you can see that's a pretty big difference, and that will have an impact on range and efficiency for sure. So far, so good then, but let's find out what it's like to drive. Right, so before we get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the trip computer so that we can get an idea of how efficient this car is and how many miles it can theoretically achieve in real-world driving, at least in quite cold conditions that we've got today. Now, all versions of the RZ have 2 electric motors, so they're 4-wheel drive. The one on the rear axle has 107 brake horsepower, and the one driving the front wheels has 201 bhp. So that is 308 brake horsepower. It's a lot of power, so unsurprisingly, this is a pretty quick car. It can do 0 to 62 in 5.3 seconds. That's quite a bit quicker than a BMW iX3, for example, although not as crazy quick as a Tesla Model Y or a GV70. But really, this is more than quick enough than any buyer is going to expect. And to be honest, although it is very fast, it's not a sporty car at all. If you start to drive this hard, you'll find it pretty composed, but there is quite a lot of body lean, and you can feel it running out of grip on faster corners. So you're better off at driving at 5, 6, 7 tenths and just enjoying the very good ride comfort and quiet cruising manners that this car has. The control weights are really impressive as well. So the brake pedal in some electric cars can be quite grabby. It just makes it hard to slow down smoothly. Whereas in this, it's very predictable, and it's the same story with the steering really. It's not particularly quick, but gives you a reasonable sense of connection with the front wheel. It's easy to place the car. This is the car with a normal steering wheel, of course. We'll be driving the one with the yoke a bit later on, so we'll see what that's like. But otherwise, very, very composed, easy to drive, quite confidence inspiring, just not that sporty. So if you're more interested in comfort, refinement, this will really appeal. If you want to go fast and you want something that's going to go around corners very, very quickly, then there are better electric cars out there. Right, so we've done a few miles now, and the trip computer is saying we are averaging 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So that works out to about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. Not bad. It works out to a range of around about 200 miles on charge. It is, as I said earlier, quite cold today and it's quite hilly as well, so you should get further than that. And it's important to point out that we have been running the climate control normally. If we use the radiant heaters, that would cut the consumption quite a bit, so it should get further on a charge. And if you really want to maximize distances between charges, then you can switch on the range mode here. And what that does is that turns off the air conditioning completely, and it also reduces the power output and the top speed as well, down to 100 kilometers an hour, which is around 62 miles an hour. That should help you get quite a lot further between charges and will improve efficiency as well. Of course, you will have to put up with quite a cold cabin on a day like today. Right, so we've driven the version of the RZ that you can buy right now. First deliveries of that are expected in May of this year, but we have been given the chance to drive a model that isn't coming to Europe until at least 2025. And rather than a proper steering wheel, it has one of these. So this butterfly shaped thing here looks similar to a yoke, and it's not actually connected to the front wheels at all, directly at least. What this does is when I turn it, activates a servo on the front axle, and that in turn turns the front wheels. All very clever in theory, if a little bit scary, but let's find out what it's like. Okay, first impressions. Well, it's a little bit weird to be honest. The steering is incredibly quick, so a couple of degrees either side of center, and you make quite a big turn. So that takes a little bit getting used to. If you get in the car at first, you could easily steer off the road or into another car or something. But on the plus side, that does make this car incredibly maneuverable. It's only 150 degrees from center to full right lock, and then from center to full left lock. So there's no crossing arms required or feeding the wheel through your hands to get around tight corners. You just feel like a Formula One driver. You just make one simple move, keep your hands on the wheel, and you get around the corner very easily indeed. The ratio is variable though, so when you're going quicker, as we are now, it calms down a bit, so you're not making violent direction changes when you apply the same degree of lock. So that means it's more stable, and although it takes a few minutes to get used to, after a while, it feels quite natural, and you can steer the car along the road quite happily. The only thing is, I'm not entirely sure of the benefit. Sure, it's a little bit more maneuverable at low speeds, but is that worth whatever premium Lexus is going to charge for this when it comes to the UK? Another slightly annoying thing about this version is the indicator stalk. So rather than a conventional indicator that you get on the car we drove earlier, you get this tiny little thing down here. And it's the one touch variety that BMW and various other manufacturers used to use in their cars. So what happens is you press it down and then it returns to center. So if it doesn't cancel itself automatically when you're going around a corner, then you've got to do that yourself. And then you end up indicating the other way, and you kind of have to just press it very slightly to get it to cancel itself. So I'm not, again, sure of the benefits of that. But I must point out, this isn't the final signed off version of this car. There's a lot of work still to be done before European sign off. That won't happen until at least 2025. So we must reserve final judgment until we've driven the final production car in the UK. Another really cool thing about this car is that because it's what will be a Takumi version in the UK, it gets this glass roof as standard. And if I press this button up here, it goes from transparent to opaque almost immediately. So on a sunny day, I can effectively just block out that and keep the interior a bit cooler rather than having to wind across a blind or something like that. Prices for the RZ start at $62,600, so it's slightly cheaper than the BMW iX3 and Genesis electrified GV70. However, if you want those energy efficient radiant heaters, 20-inch alloys and a surround view monitor, which many buyers will do, you'll need to go for at least the Premium Plus pack model, and that pushes up the price by $4,000. On the plus side, depreciation is predicted to be slower than on key rivals, and you can have up to a 10-year warranty, not just on the battery, but the whole car, if you get your RZ serviced at a Lexus dealer every year. So while the range of the new RZ is nothing to write home about, it's very compelling in many other ways. We'll be putting it up against its key rivals when we get hold of a car in the UK later in the spring, but in the meantime, for lots more information about Lexus's brand new electric SUV, just head over to whatcar.com by clicking the link above. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and switch on notifications for lots more reviews like this one.